You're listening to the Point. Ready or not, let's keep it real at Turning Point.
More often than not, the unexpected happens. Life comes with real challenges. The reason we're here is to have those hard conversations, to grow, and to realize we are not alone. Ready or not, let's start understanding more about the darkness of a broken home from a woman who has been there and has overcome all the odds. Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Debbie Taylor, the director of Turning Point, along with my co-host, Sherry, who is our nurse manager, and Nikki behind the scenes over here. With us today is Beth, who is an extraordinary woman. She is a pastor's wife. She's a teacher. She's a mentor. She's just an incredible woman with an incredible story. And she just wants to share about her overcoming. And so, Beth, we're so glad that you joined us today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. So I just want to hear more about your past. I mean, I know the woman that you are now, and I know that as we've been doing these podcasts, women have come forward with their stories, but you are one of those women that we just look at and you have it all together and you know what you're doing. And so to even think about you being somebody who has a story of darkness or overcoming struggles doesn't really seem real in my head. So tell us a little bit about you.
Well, as you mentioned, growing up in a broken home, now as a pastor's wife, seeing life through this lens that I live every day is so totally different from what I grew up in. I'm the youngest of 4 children growing up in a broken home. My mom was an alcoholic. Each of us kids had a different father. There was just no stability in our home. My sisters were involved in forms of prostitution. My brother was in jail for robbery. There was just a lot of turmoil growing up in my home. There'd be times, we wouldn't have money for, electricity, or sometimes we'd have electricity but no water. So we were always begging and borrowing and stealing, and that was my childhood. Panhandling on the streets was something I did a lot, and then of course as things moved into childhood prostitution. My sister particularly was the one who would take me out and pimp me to pedophiles, and I didn't understand that it was anything different. I just thought that that's the way all kids grew up. But it wasn't until I was about 10 years old. I remember thinking about my family with the alcohol and all of the dysfunctionality of my home growing up. I remember thinking that there had to be more to life than this. And I met a woman on the beach in my hometown. For some reason, I was just drawn to her, and I started following her around, and she started sharing with me about God's love and that God had a plan for my life. And it just hit me. And I remember thinking, this is it. There is something more to this life than just what I was seeing in my family. And so I wouldn't leave her. I just kept following her all the way home to her house. And finally, when we got to her house, she said, "Would you like to pray to ask Jesus into your heart?" And I said, yes, without a doubt. I wanted this gift of heaven. And so I knelt at her couch and prayed and asked Jesus to be my Lord and Savior. And I had no idea all that was taking place at that time. Come to find out, she was a woman. Her and her husband could never have children, and she worked with Child Evangelism Fellowship, and she was tired of working with children and went down to the beach to get away from kids. And,
and found a kid.
And there I was, and I wouldn't leave her alone. Well, she shared with me about God's love, and I ran home to my mom to tell her this truth, this amazing truth. I was like, "Mom, you can't believe what I just did." And my mom's response was, I know all about that, and I was just like shocked that she would know this good news and have never told me. And she said, I don't mind if you visit that lady, just don't get religious. And so from the time I was 10 years old, I was the only believer in my family. And I remember just have a tremendous thirst for the Lord. And I started going to Sunday school and going to church. And this woman basically took me under her wing, and she raised me in the Lord. when I was in about ninth grade, I started growing very quickly, and it was in ninth grade that my mother decided all of my sisters and my brother had already left home, and I was the last one at home. And so in ninth grade, my mom decided it was time for her to go to work on the railway. I was at home alone from ninth grade on through high school. And I remember coming home crying every day because there was nobody at home. And money would come home from time to time, but eventually money stopped. And my mom basically just walked out on me. I continued to stay in school. I started growing in ninth grade. I grew about 6 inches in 6 months.
Wow.
And
okay, hold on. I'm still, like, you were going home alone. Like, nobody knew that you were living by yourself.
No.
No services intervened.
Didn't know.
Counselor.
Back in those days, there was no such thing as child find. There was no programs back then. So I don't know how I survived, other than it was God keeping his hand on me, because there'd be times I'd open my door and there'd be a bag of groceries at my door, or I would shake somebody's hand at church and there'd be $20 in their hand. So God miraculously took care of me through the church, and I just survived. And so this freshman year, when I started growing, the coaches, of course, wanted to see me come play basketball. Well, I didn't know anything about basketball, and I didn't care to play a game that was so silly. I'd watch the NBA on TV and think, why did they blow the whistle? They're running the wrong way. And I didn't know the rules. So I figured, well, there's nothing to go home to, so I decided to go ahead and play. And I was horrible. I couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time. I couldn't do anything. And the coaches took me aside and they gave me extra care. That's the only thing I can say, is because I was vulnerable enough to say, I don't know how to do this. I got help. The kids from my high school used to come out just to laugh, to watch me play, and it was so embarrassing. About time the team was to be selected, I remember praying that morning before I went to school. I leaned my head against the mirror in the bathroom and I said, God, I don't know what you have planned for my life, but whatever you decide, this is going to be a big part of my life. And that afternoon, I went to school, and that afternoon, one of the girls at lunch said, Brenda, you made the team. So I decided, well, I guess if I made the team, I better make an effort to try about playing this game. Well, I had no idea that prayer would take me all the way through high school. Going on into college, I was named All-American in college, and that All-American status gave me the credit card I needed to go play professionally in Europe, because there was no WNBA for us women back then.
Wow. So
I went overseas. I played in the country of Norway. And it was during that time that I was going to college. I'm the only one in my family who passed 8th grade. I'm the only one in my family who's graduated high school. And so when I graduated high school, I just thought that was it, that there was no more. And I remember thinking my senior year in high school, some men came from Athletes in Action, and they came and shared their testimony at halftime of a basketball game, and they shared how God used basketball and how he had used basketball in their lives. And I began to thinking, could God use my basketball? And so I decided to go ahead and go to a small Christian college after high school. Never thought I would ever continue high school. Because nobody in my family did. And so I just assumed once I graduated that would be it. But I wanted to continue to play. And the only way to do that was to go on to college. And when I went to college, my first year and a half, I really struggled. I was dealing with some really dark times. A lot of it probably was coming back to my childhood. And now looking back, I can see very clearly the depression of all of the stuff that had happened in my life. When I transferred out of one college and went to a Bible school in Portland, Oregon, I had to start all over as a freshman because I didn't have any credits that were worth any grades. My all incoming freshmen have a big brother or big sister. Well, my big sister, she just kept loving me and caring for me and just kept surrounding me with her love. And I was pretty dark, would wear all black. I was pretty, I guess, emo, if that's a term. Before that was a term.
Before it was.
Yes.
You invented it.
And I was really keeping everybody out emotionally because I was hurt by a lot of people, and I just really didn't want anything to do with people. I just wanted my relationship with God. So I decided that people were off boundaries from me. I was just going to keep everybody.
Was there any contact with your family at that point in time?
Very little. I had contact with one sister, but when my mom left, I used to write to her every week and never heard back from her, never heard anything. At one point, I even went to the police and said, I think my mother's dead. I don't know what's happened to her. It had been over a year since I'd heard from her. So all of this is going on this whole time, growing up and wondering, where is she? And the police found her on the railway cooking as she was doing, and when she came to the phone, they told her, you need to contact your daughter. And so when I got her on the phone, I'm like, are you okay? And she's like, are you okay? And she was mad at me. And I was like, I just wanted to know where you were, that you were okay. And so
almost total abandonment.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it that way until I started growing up into the Crawford family that adopted me eventually. My big sister introduced me to her family, and she was able to take me home and meet her family. And it was the first time I'd really seen a Christian family on the inside. And so I was able to go home with her for American Thanksgiving. And during that time, I kind of remember looking around at the family thinking, this is a pretty good show they're putting on. And then at Christmas, they invited me back, and I went ahead and went back to visit them at Christmas. And by the time Easter came around, they invited me to come back again, and I couldn't wait to get there to see them.
And it was still the same show.
Yeah. And so I was just so thankful for God putting me into this family. That summer, I was going to go to South America first. I went to South America first and play basketball. And during that time, the Crawford family just continued to love me and care for me. And so when I was getting ready to go to South America, they said, sweetie, we're concerned. They said, you don't really have anyone to take care of you or help you. They said, we know you want to be a missionary, but you have no one really to support you, or if anything goes wrong, who's going to be there? And they said, we would like to adopt you. Well, I was 21 at this point, and so it was literally just a change of name, but they wanted to be just physically and emotionally and spiritually, they wanted to be my parents. It was the first time in my life where I had a mom and a dad. It was the first time in my life where I felt like I was a child, because for all my growing up years, I was the adult. I was the one taking care of my mother. I was the one borrowing or stealing or doing whatever she needed for her money. So while we had no lights and no electricity at times, she definitely had her beer. She definitely had her nights out at the bars. And so it was just such a strange experience for me as a young adult to get to be a child. It was during that time with the Crawford family that God just really touched my heart and healed me. My family had no idea of the abuse that had gone on in my life as a little girl. And I remember my dad would just hug me, and he would love me, and I would get real tense and nervous sometimes. And one time he said, sweetie, he said, I want you to know, he said, when I touch you, he says, I'm not a dirty old man. He says, I touch you like a father touches his daughter. And he says, I just want to love you.
Wow.
And that more than anything has helped heal my life and my heart from the past abuse and everything else that I went through living on the streets. And I just remember thinking that, for a long time I wasn't sure I ever wanted to get married, because I didn't want to happen to me or to my children what happened to me. And so as I was going to South America, when I returned, the Crawfords asked me, what do you plan to do this coming school year? And I said, well, I went to South America, I didn't work, so I guess I'll go back to Canada and just keep working and try to witness to my family. And they said, well, honey, we'd like to give you what we give each one of our kids. And they said, we give them 1 year of Bible school. So they paid for my second year of Bible school, which was the year that I met my husband.
That's
and
incredible.
It was also the year that I was able to take a contract and be accepted to go ahead and play professionally in Norway. And so I was able to go one step at a time. And I had met this wonderful man from New Mexico in Bible school, and he was going to Nigeria to be a teacher at a government teachers college, and I was going to Norway to play basketball. And so the only reason we kept in touch was to be able to be prayer partners for each other. And so over those 3 years, we wrote letters, and I was able to keep those letters. And when we got married, I was able to put them all in chronological order, and it is quite a love story to put together.
That's beautiful.
So, but the big thing that was a challenge for me was just once we got married and I was able to, we had 2 beautiful children, we were missionaries working in Africa, I began to struggle with depression, and I didn't know what was going on. And I remember going to the counselor and telling him, I know I've got skeletons in my closet. I don't want to deal with them. I just want to get rid of this depression. It's destroying my life. And he was very good and said, okay, we can do that. And he gave me 2 books to read. One was called A Right to Innocence, and the other one was called Boundaries, when to say yes, when to say no, and how to take control of your life. And he said, I won't talk to you until you've finished these 2 books, and when you come back, then we'll discuss further. Well, of course, chapter 3 in one book talks about child abuse, and people, kids or adults who have gone through physical, emotional, any kind of sexual abuse tend to, as adults, not have healthy boundaries, because as a child they were forced upon, then as adults they feel like they have no rights, they have no boundaries. And that's exactly what was happening to me. We were home here in the United States, here in Las Cruces, in fact, on furlough, when we visited our doctor, and he diagnosed me with clinical depression. And I was like, I can handle life. I know all about that. I'm fine. And he gave me a little booklet, and he left the room. And my husband and I, we read the little booklet, and I had 8 of the 9 symptoms of depression. And he started me on treatment right away. And for me, medication worked amazing. Within 24 hours, I came out of this cloud. The depression just was incredible. This fog just lifted from me, and I was able to have my head above water so I could deal with the issues. So I went back to the counselor and I said, okay, I know my past has something to do with this depression. I said, but I just want to get rid of it. I said, it's destroying my life. And he said, you're wrong. He said, that depression is a gift from God. And I thought he was totally crazy. And I said, it's what? And he said, it's God's way of letting you know there's something wrong. And the depression for me was just like, I could not comprehend how to get out of the drowning waters, the fog, the constant feeling like I wasn't meeting everybody's needs. And so the Christian counselor continued to walk with my husband and I through a lot of time together, and we were able to work through a lot of issues. I'm forever grateful for the Crawford family that helped me heal, so that I was able to be a good wife and a good mother. Those were 2 of my biggest goals when I did get married. And I remember thinking, God knows exactly what He has planned for us. And I remember the counselors, whenever I would pray with the counselor, I remember seeing in my eyes this little candle in the darkness. And I remember thinking, there's no fear in the truth. And God just kept pushing that into my mind. There's no fear in the truth. And so when I was thinking that all of this was normal, growing up in this turmoil and this dysfunction of my childhood, I began to realize when I became a mother and a wife, my faith made a big difference in who I was and how I was going to raise my children. And I remember not feeling, I was kind of numb when it came to what happened to me as a child. And then the counselor one day, he asked me, he said, how would you feel if somebody did this to your child? And it was incredible, the anger that just exploded from me. And I was like, if anyone ever touched me like I was touched, I would kill him, And I was just like, the anger I had to protect my daughter was so totally different than what I felt for myself. And I didn't know how to protect my own child. So it was really interesting how when I got married and then my daughter got to the age that I was when the abuse started in my life, that's when I fell into depression. Wow. And it wasn't until she was 10 years old, when I got out of the abusive situation, that I was able to get out of the depression and to be able to go through healing completely. Every time I've been able to share my story, I've often told people, I said nobody knew what I was going through, and I wasn't even sure what I was going through. But I do know that the darkness and the fear, Satan wants to keep us hidden, wants to keep the truth hidden. But when we expose it to the light, when we share the truth of what happened, we heal just a little bit more each time. And so today, as a woman who's almost 60 years old, I am just so very grateful for the privilege to have been healed by the Lord. I continue to be challenged by my past. I still struggle with some areas in my life, one of them being my weight. Sometimes people who are abused tend to go to one extreme or the other, whether it's anorexia or it's food. For me, food was a comfort thing because when I grew up, I was starving. I was one of those kids that when a kid ate an apple and threw it away, I was the kid who went over and picked it up out of the trash and I ate it. So for me, food has always been somewhat of a struggle in healing of my past. My daughter has just, my son and my daughter are the joys of my life. My husband is such a blessing. He is a pastor and a teacher, and we just complement each other so well, and God has brought him into my life to help heal me in a way that I could never have experienced before. And the fact that he loves me for who I am, regardless of what size I am. It's just been really neat to see God continually healing, continually working in me. I want to share Isaiah 49. It's a verse that has been real to me throughout my childhood. Just the fact that I kind of felt like an orphan. In Isaiah 49:15, it says, "Can a mother forget the baby of her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hand." And I just think so many times how God protected me and cared for me, and he kept me in the palm of his hand from the time I was saved until today. He has continued to walk me through the struggles and the trials of my childhood, and that those adverse childhood experiences do have an impact on us, whether we acknowledge it or not. Children will eventually grow up and they'll have scars based on what they've experienced as children. Now, healing, when there's a scar, that means healing's taken place, but there's a lot of times people are walking around with open wounds. And so it'd be my challenge to just continue to encourage gals and girls or guys to think about the fact that there is no fear in the truth. And as we speak the truth, we continue to heal and we get better.
And that's so beautiful. And I love what you said about your healing is still a work in progress. You know, I think when we see people that appear to have it all together, we feel like, okay, they've worked through their stuff. But really, we never work through our stuff. It's a part of who we are. It's a part of how we react and evolve. And that is always a work in progress.
Yes. Yeah.
So, wow. Thank you so much for sharing today.
Thank you.
We appreciate your openness, your honesty, your vulnerability, and just the power of your story and that relentless pursuit God had over you.
Right.
It's incredible. So.